Ah, there it is. Hey, Jodi, how's it going?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm good. I'm trying to figure out if it's is it Merry Data Privacy Week? Is it Happy Data Privacy Week? Is it
That's a
Great?
good question. I think I've been seeing Happy Data Privacy Week.
Yeah. Okay. So
We're
let's
so happy. You know, it's the first day. We can set the series. It is Happy Data Privacy Week, everyone.
and just make sure that it is. Well, let's see. Let's. See. I'll ask you again at the end of these 30 minutes and see if it is. Um, hey, so before we get started, we're talking about sustainability, but not in the way people think, right? Like it's in a number of ways. It's not an environmental thing, although it could be. But just different angles on how to think about sustainability when it comes to building privacy programs. But before we get to that, Jodi, like a little on you, like you're a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, practical privacy advisor, fractional privacy officer. So my first question is, where do you find the time?
There's not a lot of time to do a whole lot else. So pre-show, we were talking about travel, and there's just a little bit of that time. But in all seriousness, I very much enjoy trying to make privacy simple and helping companies sort through all these complex laws that I know we're going to dive into. And so at Red Clover, we're helping companies do just that. We're simplifying all the privacy operations. So think about the long list of tasks that someone has to actually do. Figure out this new law that just passed last week, the data inventories and cookies and notices, and talk to marketing teams. We're helping companies sort through all of that. And then we do have a podcast and we have a book. So people who and we put out content all the time in a variety of different ways. So for people who like to listen, check out the podcast. She said privacy, he said security. For those who like to read, there's a variety of articles and a book. And the book is called Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jodi. I remember when we first got to know you, and it was about marketing teams and building trust and responsible data. I'm like, I like where she's going with that. It felt like there wasn't a lot of people taking that angle. So let's talk about that a little today. But first, sustainability, when you say that in the context of data privacy, what do you mean by that?
I think many people believe privacy is a task list. It's a compliance exercise. And that is a good place to start. Many companies won't pay attention until they get the law that they have to comply with all buttoned up. So great place. But once you go through the tasks, the specific requirements for whichever law you have to pay attention to, it's not pencils down or mouse down, I guess, in the digital universe. There's still more to do. Privacy is ongoing. I haven't met a company yet who isn't changing the tools that they're using in their business or how they're collecting data or the kind of data that they're collecting or trying to grow and expand. There's really very few companies who are just happy to move along and do the same thing every single day, which means privacy is here to stay and it needs to be thought of just like, how much is a project going to cost? No one ever says, you know what, you can buy anything you want. It doesn't matter what the cost is. No one ever says that. Privacy needs to get to that same place. That's one example of this idea of sustainability, making it just a part of the organization on an ongoing basis.
Jodi, especially think about how fast business and data use is changing. Obviously with Gen AI, but even outside of that, I love that because you think sustainable compliance and you think, well, new laws are coming. I need to make sure I'm always compliant with those. And there's two things wrong with that. One is it's not just about new laws. It's about your business changes. And secondly, I don't even think it's just about compliance. It's about responsible data practices and this idea of trust with the consumer, and that adapts and that evolves. And so you need to be on top of that. So let's hit those in that order, if you don't mind. So firstly, the boring one, right? Like the one everyone knows. Okay. So new laws. What's coming? What do you see from your perch? What are some of those enforcement trends around them?
Well, it's the middle of, I guess, the third week of January now, and we already have two new ones. Though interestingly, New Jersey technically counts in the 2023 pile of laws, even though their season ended in 2024. My prediction was we were going to have 7 to 10 new states. That was just Jodi's prediction. We're 2 in so far. It'll be really interesting to see what continues to happen. But I do anticipate more laws joining what I'm calling the privacy train. And we're at 14 states so far. What's fascinating, though, is that there are some common themes and then still some differences. Some states believe nonprofits are large enough to count just like organizations. So far, we've seen California as the lone soldier with employees and B2B context still included. We have some states who are taking the opt-in approach for sensitive data, some states who are wrapping children in at the beginning. So it's just kind of interesting to see where the states are going. Some are really particular with opt-in consent, some are particular with data protection assessments. I think we all kind of have different similarity. Well, I guess there's differences, but there's still enough similarities among them. I'm seeing companies not treat 14 different ways. They're trying to find the commonalities across them to build a sustainable program, which will make sure that they're compliant with the differences, but overall, they're not making 14 different decisions at this point with just state laws. Then let's add in globally as well. In terms of trends, I think we're going to see a lot more with kids data. I think we're going to see a lot more with sensitive data, which will include geolocation data and health data for sure.
And we see with enforcement trends so far with the FTC at least, and we're absolutely seeing that, right? With X mode, all about location data. And then, what I wanted to ask you, Jodi, is so early last year, April last year, we saw FTC Commissioner Bedoya at the IAPP conference. And he said, look, we're all about transparency and accountability. And I know what transparency means, and I'm wondering if they're enforcing there. But accountability also, like what do they mean by that? Like who has the obligation here when it comes to privacy?
Well, the way I interpret that accountability piece is going to be if the company has to say what they are actually doing, that transparency part is going to be that privacy notice. The accountability piece is also going to be, okay, inside the company, how are you making sure that you have responsible data practices? What are your controls? If we think about a financial scenario, there's controls in place so that dollars, just don't go out the organization and any of the dollars coming in go to the proper places. Those are financial controls. So where are the privacy data responsibility controls? If I'm going to launch a new product and service, or I want to go and collect location data, then the organization has to be accountable to what it says in the privacy notice. For example, I will only collect location data with your consent, and I will use location data this way. The accountability piece would be, okay, organization has these provisions in place to say, great new plan. Let's ask the right questions. Who are the team members who are going to review this scenario? Oh, we need consent. Let's make sure we have consent. Let's make sure it's not a dark pattern consent. Let's make sure it matches what our privacy notice is. And that control kind of wraps together the transparency to actually doing something in the organization.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, Jodi. I wanted to get your thoughts on how companies do that. Like, what's the blueprint for that? Where do you even start?
There's a couple different ways. I think in a larger organization where they have a bit of a more mature, or in the process of standing up a privacy impact assessment, what we like to have is not just the privacy impact assessment, which helps make sure you're compliant with XYZ laws, but a threshold assessment, a short list of questions. It could be 10 questions, 5 questions. It could be a short list that goes to all the different teams, our marketing friends, our product friends, our HR friends, whoever has a pile of data that might be doing something, to ask them, hold on, what are you collecting? How are you using it? Where are you storing it? Where are you sharing it? Are you doing something new and interesting or different than what's been before? That short list identifies, nope, we're not doing anything with personal information. Great. You don't need to do my long one over here. Oh, yes, we are. Well, then, okay, let's move you forward. And we might need to put you through our actual assessment. Now, for smaller organizations who don't have any of this set up yet, a great place to start is the short list. Let's just create that short list of questions to get people thinking about privacy. Because right now, in every meeting, whether it's a new marketing campaign or a new product launch, they are thinking, how much does it cost? Is there a legal concern? Who's the tech? And what are my people? They have all the legal, HR, tech, and financial pieces. We need privacy to join them. And the other way that companies can accomplish this is by literally just old-fashioned talking.
Mm.
Actually having conversations in a regular, steady meeting cadence. How often, in my mind, is dependent on each organization. Maybe it's monthly because there's so many new campaigns or new products or features coming out. Maybe it's quarterly because there's just not that much and you just don't want to lose touch. And there's a lot happening in the privacy side. It's a great time to be able to say, hi, here's everything happening in privacy land. You tell me what's happening in your side, and we're going to see, is there any changes we need to make? So actually connecting and having conversations to make sure that both sides, privacy brings what's new and interesting, and the business brings what's new and interesting, can be incredibly effective.
I got you, Jodi. It's like, it sounds like it starts with a mindset shift before anything, and of course collaboration. We were at a little privacy dinner that we try to host around the country, and I remember I had two lawyers either side, and one said, I'm like a department of no to these folks. Like, it's like an afterthought, and they have already built 90% of what they want to build, and then they're like, oh, we need to check some privacy box. Let me go talk to our privacy lawyer. And then on the other side, somebody said, that's the total opposite of my experience. I'm integrated super early as a privacy lawyer into these product discussions. And she just seems so much more relaxed about it. And the output, whatever that product is going to be good. It's going to be good for consumers. And so, where have you seen, like, are you seeing that kind of mix as well? Like, are people leaning one way or another? Like, what do lawyers do to try to be more like the second person rather than the first?
So first I want to say, I don't think it's a lawyer versus non-lawyer thing. I think it's a person's style and or culture thing. Because I think there's a variety of attorneys that I know who have integrated themselves really well, and they're not the department of no, even if their answer actually ends up being no. I think where people, and my advice to privacy pros would be, we don't want to be the department of no. And the answer really might be no. So what does that mean? Well, here's what will happen if you do that. There could be a compliance risk. Here's what the customer is going to think. Let's tie this to your end results. Let me share a story. I recall once I had an organization, they wanted to use emails and send to the customers emails that they had no idea about the other brand. Legally and technically, they could, based on the privacy notice, what people had said, affiliates, it was legally sound to be able to do it. So there it wouldn't have been a no. But it made no sense. I said to the customer, so what's your ROI going to be? Oh, it's going to be terrible. We don't expect to have a good ROI on these emails. So you're going to send emails to customers who are going to be mad that they're getting this. You're going to tarnish the brand. They're not going to open it. You're going to get a terrible ROI. Why on earth would you do that? Those are real stories. Now we were able to work through it because they came early. And they came early because we were able to have good conversations. I think the old expression, reach out and touch someone, right? Reach out and create a relationship. It was a communications company who had that slogan, in case anyone's curious. But the idea of being able to create a relationship with someone and have a regular touch point in your story, I'm going to guess that the person who we're not the pile of no, people are coming all the time, had those relationships. If you're only the person and you only give no and you don't walk through why this isn't good for the company, why this isn't in the best interest of the customer, and instead offer, but here's what could be. Could we do this instead? I appreciate you want to do this thing over here. Here's why that's not going to be the best privacy decision, but let's talk about what your goals are. And let's see if we can find you something that will still accomplish your goals, which typically is sell more things, make sure we're getting accurate data. And there's other ways to solve for that. That is how we get past just being no and just compliance and really being able to be part of the organization.
I'm with you, Jodi. It doesn't have to be a department of no. It can be a department of let's figure it out. But I think, like, let me help you. We're working for the same company. Let me help you what you need to do. But also this idea that the vibe I'm picking up, it's not a privacy check the box thing for compliance purposes. It's a check-in on the consumer. It's a check-in on do you really want to send the emails in that way? And marketing should be thinking about that already, but in case they're not, this is kind of a nice check where the dialogue opens that up. So we talked about this a little bit, right? The mindset shift, who gets invited to the conversation. What are you seeing there in terms of, like, is marketing showing up in the conversation? Is data showing up? Like, who is showing up outside of privacy folks into these privacy conversations at businesses you work with?
That is a very all over the place and dependent on the company answer. I am seeing a growing trend of marketers realize that this privacy thing is here to stay and they have to join the conversations. And it will be better if they join the conversations, because to our last conversation, we don't want to just say no. We want to help accomplish their goals in a privacy friendly way. And the entire goal of the marketing team is to sell more things, whether that's products or services. And the more we do that in a way that the customer is not going to be surprised by, then everyone's going to win. We're going to make sure that we are complying with the privacy laws. We're going to be transparent in our privacy notice. We're going to get accurate data that marketing teams are going to be able to actually rely on. And so marketers are definitely showing up. I'm also seeing, interestingly, a lot of security organizations start owning the privacy operations. If they're large enough, they still might have the legal team own kind of, here's a law and here's what we have to comply with. But the actual to-dos and daily tasks and figuring it out is starting in some organizations to go to security. That tends to be for organizations where they don't have anyone in place for privacy. They already had someone in security, and that executive team thinks, well, those are close enough. So security people, you go on that. And I'm starting to see that. You're also starting to see privacy counsel for some organizations who are able to hire in that, as well as the privacy operational people. And then for organizations who have employees, either in California or globally, I'm definitely seeing HR being a part of the conversation, and sometimes even owning the privacy piece if they're a smaller organization, because it comes up on the employee side first. And then it's, oh, well, actually, I see there's more that I have to deal with. Okay, I'll get the rest of those people involved.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, we talked a little about new laws that are coming, and then we start to touch on now just your business is changing, right? And the organizational designs that potentially solve for the mindset shift and for the dialogue. What are some of those triggers that you see within companies that kind of get you thinking about this more and more? I mean, AI, of course, geo expansion. Like, what are some of those things you see where companies see those triggers and say, look, we can't ignore this any longer?
Well, we worked with one particular company, and their privacy notice, for example, was all set for marketing activities for people in the US. Now they wanted to have some virtual events and live events, actually, that were going to expand, where they knew that there'd be an EU audience. And they wanted to make sure that they had everything that they needed to be able to capture that. That is a business change. They want to be able to go from US to the EU. And now that wasn't business expansion, like physically, that was just who their players were going to be. New products and services. I've seen some where maybe they were in a B2B environment and now they're going to a B2C environment. They're going to launch some new type of product or service, and they want to make sure that they're able to cover everything that might be involved there. The others might be from the kind of data that they're holding. Maybe they're going to start expanding and doing something a little bit new type of data collection. And the other is a lot of times in a business service provider relationship where they've always been the processor. Now they want to start utilizing data differently, which might make them a controller or a business. And so as a result, they have to think through what some of those privacy challenges would be. I would say the majority of the shifts are, as you just pointed out, AI. So any kind of new technology, though. It doesn't have to be AI. Any kind of new technology, new vendor, just new way of doing something with data. I'm collecting it. I'm doing something different with it. I'm going to share it. We're going to do a joint venture, a joint partnership, a joint marketing activity. I'm going to sponsor it for the first time at a conference. Now I'm going to get leads, any kind of new sales activity. All of those are some of the common ways that privacy is popping up.
Yeah, so Jodi, I want to ask you two things about that. Firstly, and not that it's all about enforcement, right? But like, it's one of the things we think about. But if you look at the Rite Aid case and with the FTC, it showed a move away from targeted advertising as something they care about, right? But it also showed Rite Aid using facial recognition technology for fraud prevention. And so what was for you the the takeaways from that? I mean, it was the FTC saying, I get it, man, do it. You got to do fraud prevention, get the latest technology when you do that, but you got to wrap around policies and procedures when you do that, right? Because I think that the issue, if I remember right, was a lot of false positives in some of that data. And the FTC was like, hey, we don't just care about targeted advertising, care about the data you're using for whatever you're doing. So it gets down to secondary purpose and all sorts of stuff. But I was curious what your thoughts were on that case in particular.
I would echo that policies and procedures piece. It is reasonable for a company to want to have fraud prevention. There are, increased crime, and that makes sense. What didn't make sense was the lack of training, the access that these employees had, the zero policies, how long they were retaining the data for. All of those are the areas where you want to mitigate. So the problem is loss prevention. The solution is a technology. What should have happened was an assessment about, okay, so here's all the privacy risks and security risks that we need to consider. How will we mitigate them? And it just appears that, I don't know if it happened and they weren't mitigated, it was ignored. I'm not sure what took place, but for anyone listening who's looking at some type of new technology, where they went wrong, and the lesson is you have to have an assessment. You have to identify the risks. You have to decide how you're going to mitigate them. Keeping it for as long as they did with that type of access does not count as mitigation. So that's what, in my opinion, we really want to learn from it.
Jodi, to what we were talking about earlier, this mindset shift, not that long ago, businesses were collecting as much data as they could in case it was useful, right? They were storing it for as long as they could in case they needed it. And we were at the IAB thing, the State Privacy Law Summit last year, and we had Michelle Lucan, who's the data privacy chief in Connecticut, and she was talking. She's great. She kind of gives you some of that inside baseball on how regulators are thinking about this. And she said, look, I've been talking to brands and I've been asking them two questions. Why do you have so much data? And why are you keeping it for so long? And she said, I've just been met with shrugs. Well, we don't know, can't be doing it that way. And so this idea of wrapping policies and procedures around, which by the way, especially when you're using AI, now you've got to think about bias as well. But even before you get to that, are you keeping the right amount of data for the thing you're doing? And how long do you retain it for? The businesses need to get there, right? Are they starting this journey? Where are they on this?
Yeah, I think we have a long way to go, if I'm honest. Different departments are collecting data that other departments don't know. IT organizations do not have a good handle on all of the data. We have all these amazing new tools that especially marketing teams can easily go. I don't need IT to get a new webinar tool or a survey tool or a CRM tool or a gifting tool I can keep going, and I can easily put data in any of these places. Those are just simple examples. So I think there are obviously many, many companies who are trying to do the right thing and get a handle on their data. Some of these companies are so vast, it is so wide how much data they have and where it is and what their practices have been. It's going to take a while to untangle the web. People in the tech area will say it's like Band-Aids. So many companies have these legacy systems and they've all just been Band-Aided together. And that's pretty true. So if you're going to try and unpeel them and understand what's happening behind there, that's pretty messy and just takes time to create a whole new approach, which I do think that might be the next digital transformation that might take place, is this idea of less data, less is more, only what you need in a collection vehicle that has really privacy embedded into those systems. Right now, we have systems and we then have other systems trying to find the data and tell you what you have. Whereas I think more and more of the systems will be created truly from a privacy lens.
I really worry, Jodi, about the shiny new toy syndrome and what that does when you should be thinking about privacy. So just a small personal example, I was in Australia recently and I rented a car. And to skip the line, I had to upload my license and all sorts of stuff on their app. And then I had to take a photo through the app, and I had to smile in the photo. And they said, "You're not smiling." And I had to take a photo 3 times. I'm like, "Come on." And I'm like, all right, it's cool. It's a cool customer service angle. I can kind of see it. But as a privacy professional, got me worried. What are you doing? What are you going to do with this data now? Like, now you have my photo, you've got my license, you've got all sorts of stuff. And it's just, it made me have the feeling, I don't think they get it. I think they're just going to jump in on more data collection using these shiny new toys, shiny new tools to kind of just collect more and more data without thinking about this. If they don't take your advice, I think, and shift mindsets. Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective. Your travel story reminds me, actually, I was on a particular airline that said, hey, you could get a streaming service. So click here while you're on flight. So I did that, but on that streaming service, they wanted my all kinds of information. It wasn't interconnected at all. I needed to basically sign up for this other streaming service, give them my birth date, all this information. And so I said, no. I went back to the boring shows I had on my screen.
What? See, I still did it. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Well, you needed a car.
Yeah,
Yours was, you need the car. You're kind of forced in that situation. And that is, I think, the frustrating part. You were forced to really give that data, and you didn't want to. In my situation, in my opinion, they shouldn't have asked for that information. I'm sitting on an airplane. Don't offer me the streaming service and market all about this amazing streaming service if you just are going to collect more data on me. You didn't actually need that.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to have mine.
I love it, Jodi. I need that kind of resolve. Hey, so it looks like we've got a question here. So which operating models have you seen be successful where you have a dedicated privacy compliance office and which is collaborating with marketing, tech, data, etc.?
So I'm going to assume that the question in terms of like model is, where do the privacy people sit? So I think what I have found is I really like a dedicated privacy team. I actually don't like them with the security team. I think they should be good friends, but they should sit in different parts of the organization. If the organization is large enough and there's some kind of compliance or risk organization, that's where privacy tends to fit most. Otherwise, I find that privacy fits wherever anyone's paying attention to data. And it is a little bit of the lonely stepchild there. After you have your privacy team, large organizations can have privacy champions in different parts of the company. You can still be very successful, even if you just have really strong ties and relationships with the heads of each of the functional areas in your company. You can be a smaller organization. And as I said earlier, just get to know the leaders and the decision makers in the core functions of your company. That could be marketing, it could be tech, that could be data, that could be finance. Just get to know them and really build a relationship.
I love the idea of as close to data as you can, and it doesn't have to report in, but have the relationships, right? And also, like, it shouldn't just be a compliance function. I mean, it can sit there, but we're talking about more than compliance here.
Oh, yeah. Even if you sit in compliance, you're not done. You could sit there. You're going to not be successful if you don't have the relationships. I think any job is successful because you have a good relationship. It doesn't matter what job you're in. You will be successful because you have good relationships. Privacy cannot be accomplished if there are not strong cross-functional relationships. The very nature of what privacy is all about is understanding what the entire organization is doing with data. Its fundamental premise is cross-functional. It has to be based on having a good relationship. And you said it earlier, you're all on the same team for the company. Everyone has the same goal of making the company successful, just different ways.
I love it, Jodi. Well, final question for you. So you're a chief privacy officer. You've just started working at a brand. You're planning your first 100 days. They pick up the phone. They call Jodi. What do I do? What do you tell them?
I'm going to tell them 2 things. One is exactly what I just said, which is go pick up the phone and go meet all the different functional people all throughout the company and start understanding and just hearing and listening. We do XYZ over here in this department. We do XYZ over here in this department, and just get to know people and explain to them, here's what your job is, and here's how you are a resource. You are a resource. You are here. And then at the same time, part of that exercise needs to be understanding the data in the company.
You know, Jody, we had a business development sales guy who used to say the phone is one of the most underutilized tools in sales. Just pick up the banana, and it's like just do it, right? Just start calling people. Jody, thanks. I really appreciate your time and perspective today. We'll catch you next time. By the way, I love the whole purple sweater, purple background thing. We didn't do that.
Completely coordinated, of
Might
course.
be a thing.
Purple is my favorite color. Thank you so much for having me. It was pure joy.
Thanks, Jody. See you.